Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. Mark and Melissa DeJesus in the house. Ready to go. We're ready to go.
Listen, I am too.
This is, I think, part 3. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think it is.
In talking through a series on what's the journey like for us? What are the things that we have to become aware of and work through? And
where are we hot messes, maybe, basically? People have been so kind about it. Gosh, what great feedback we've gotten. So thank you to all of you that have commented and are being kind, because kindness, it goes a long way,
Yeah, it shows what we're really needing is authentic sharing of, hey, here's what I find helpful. Let me be a help to you, but here's where I'm going in my journey as well, too. I really feel like it helps put things in perspective because we really get shamed in the stuff we struggle with. And then we think we're the only ones battling with it. And then we think there's no way out. And we're in this prison of what we're wrestling with. And really, when you realize, we're all continually growing and healing through things in our lives. If you can give yourself permission for that. So maybe what we're doing here will give you permission in your own life, in your own marriage, in your family, to be more at a gracious posture towards like what you're wrestling through and what you're working through in your life and your journey. One of the things that you and I were talking about, we talk about this a lot in our our journey, is when you come to terms with like, I want to live a healed and free life. Like I want to walk in new patterns, whether it's certain thinking patterns, mental health, how I do relationships, how I navigate choices, how I deal with problems, addictions, and pain and all that.
Right.
And you say, I want to learn, I want to grow, whatever that looks like and whatever that means. There's this aspect of family that you have to tend with. And you have to come to terms with what you grew up with, your family history. There's an aspect of learning that, understanding that. And there's many ties and ways that you're plugged into your family, whether you realize it or not, in the patterns and ways of your family. And there is this step that I find many of us have to learn in deeper and deeper ways, is this aspect of like leaving father and mother, like as you become an adult, learning to take that step. You're becoming your own person, and you're learning how to honor and latch on to the blessings that were there, but yet recognize there's some serious stuff that wants to follow you that you have to wrestle with in your journey and begin to make some of those generational shifts and changes. But there's a lot, it's messy.
It really is.
Yeah. And so, which leads to some things I think that you were talking about as far as things that you find you're working through, and everything you shared was things I resonated with, but they're very highlighted for you, and what you sense are the things that you're really working through and navigating in your life. How would you first summarize what that looks like for you, and then we can dive into what the struggles of it are. Right.
Well, I think just highlighting what you were saying on recognizing there's a bunch of things in recognizing. Okay, leaving father and mother, getting married, working, building, growing in marriage, and hitting roadblocks. And in those times of hitting roadblocks, investigating, why am I hitting these roadblocks? Because you have your personal journey, but you also have your marriage journey. It's like a very interesting road to go on. And I think at different stages, you have to look at different things. So leaving father and mother was something that you and I both looked at early on in our marriage, of things we were bumping up against. I would say in looking at the different things, one of them was confronting how I viewed men. How did I view marriage? What were my, notions that I had on what it should look like? Then it was, how did I behave in a family setting? What kind of patterns was that? There was all these things that I feel like God has really shown us and worked with us over the years of some of it's like, oof, it hits you and you go, oh man, that sucks. That feels awful. But you look at it. Go ahead.
And I don't even know that these things you have to like really dig for. Some people think like, I got to really figure out like, what are the family things I'm breaking free from? A lot of it is actually kind of rising up to the surface and like hitting you. I tell people the biggest struggles that you have in your life are probably aspects of what's in your family. It may not be as clear to you, or it may not be in the same exact avenue. A lot of times it is.
Right. Well, you go into it thinking, most people do, I think, I'm not going to do what my parents did. Mm-hmm. And then you end up manifesting these patterns of either as a wife, a parent, that looks like similarly. Sometimes you're deceived too. Mm-hmm. You think, no, I am doing it different. And it's like, okay, when you get down to it's all unhealed stuff that you're carrying from your family patterns. So for me, off the jump, I was confronted in this a lot of ways. And I think the basic thing for me that I had to look at was how codependent I was with my family. Because you and I got, for me, married a little bit later in life. By the time we got married, I was 33. So I had a dating history, but I wasn't married. I wasn't fully given over to someone in marriage. So I had bad patterns in place as far as how I retreated back to them, how I got my value from them, how I how I felt about myself. Everything came from them. And this got confronted pretty quickly in our dating life. And I'm going to share a story that you and I had to deal with this pretty early on. So when you and I are dating, we didn't have a very traditional dating scenario of the stuff that we had to deal with in our dating life. And a lot of it...
Meaning Meaning, maybe you could explain that.
Okay, meaning we had a beautiful love story within us, but there was outside things that I don't recommend anybody having to go through as far as getting to the point of our actual marriage ceremony. You were leaving the church that you had been at since you were 17 on staff, and then since a child attending. There was a massive amount of relationships. There was a lot of stuff around you leaving, and that was literally right before we were going to get married. We got married, and a month later, I was moving on from the church. We were down to where we even had to change the wedding invitations because we were originally going to get married at the church, and then there was we had so much stuff going. We had to change the venue,
the construction of all that.
And during this time too, we had a lot of stuff coming at us. Even the people that loved you and you were confronting and dealing with, okay, they're listening to gossip. And then I had people yelling at me that I was taking you away from the church. We had a lot of outside things that were really tough on us. Well, I had never dealt with anything like this before. And when I came into your life, I had a very naive notion of what ministry and being part of all that was. I didn't understand that world. I was extremely naive, and I thought my idea of stepping into ministry with you was I was just going to be welcomed and loved with open arms, and it was not that way. It was not that way at all. And there was a lot of wounds very early on that I didn't realize I was going to have to deal with. And so I say all that because I was full of emotions about it and pain, and I didn't know what to do with it. And you were doing the best you could, but you were also dealing with your own pain about that time. So I had spoken to, I want to say it was maybe 2 weeks before our wedding, I had spoken to a family member about this, and I was sobbing, and this person proceeded to scream at me. What was I doing? What was I getting myself into? You can get out of this. Now, all the stuff I was upset about wasn't at Mark. It was the situation going on around us. And this person just laid into me. And you came home and found me. I was we had a half bathroom in the condo in Connecticut, and I was just in the corner, just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And we had conversations about family stuff, but we were in such a world, when you're in love and you're going to get married, and we had all that beautiful stuff going on, but we had a lot of stuff on the periphery that was coming at us. So I don't know that we necessarily were like understanding our family dynamics that much at that time.
Yeah.
But it was the first time of looking at how much I had gone to them for so many reasons, to feel better about myself. How did they see me? Then I would be okay. If they weren't okay with me, that would affect how I interacted with you, which ended up being something that we dealt with early on. Because if I felt you did something that maybe they didn't like, or you were in process of, I would get angry at you because I wanted you to look, I think a lot of people can relate to this in marriage. I wanted you to look perfect to them. So a lot of who I was, my self-esteem, just a lot of things went back to them. A lot of it did. And it was hard to look at that too, because I was so wrapped up in getting approval from them. So, rejection has been a very big thing that I've had to deal with on my journey. And making sure I was in like right standing. Like they were in a lot of ways my Holy Spirit, my God, that I would look to of like, wow. Am I okay? Do they think I'm okay? Is my mother being nice to me? Does she think I'm making right choices? Does my father think I look good today or pretty today? Okay, I'm making good choices. Like it was so distorted how much I was tied to them in so much of who I was.
It's hard to see that though when you're in the midst of it, and you're living in that. That's why when we call it like familiar kind of things, there is that word family is like to do a word play, familiar, family, and it's also familiar. I'm not saying this as like a biblical doctrine, but like in the Bible they call it familiar spirits,
right?
That's like these kind of things are very familiar,
right?
in how we work and operate. So it's challenging to like know, like, okay, this is unhealthy and I need to break away into new patterns. This leap is, and it's interesting because the addict community in recovery has picked up on this pattern, this codependency thing. They're the ones that termed it,
right? Because
they saw that people that had alcoholism, there was people around who their relationship world got sucked into the vortex of the dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So therefore they became codependent. They recognized it. But a lot of us in the world, whether it's addictions or whatever we want to call it or rename it, have these kind of patterns that it's all we know, so down to like how you clean your house or don't clean your house, or how you, where you put things, or how you deal with pain, or how like they become these ingrained things. You kind of just think this is the way to do it. Right.
100%. And piggybacking onto that, I had a massive amount of self-doubt. So because I was constantly always questioning myself, I would look to them. Okay. So what that did is it set in motion a pattern of always looking to others for approval. I never had any good self-esteem. So that just would constantly be on me. Constantly. I mean, about everything, which, goes into OCD, like all kinds of stuff that it ended up creating in my life because I didn't have a good sense of self and affirmation and love and all that stuff growing up in a family with dysfunction and alcohol and patterns and things like that. So now going into marriage, this is where I want to pause because I'm just so grateful on your pursuit because it's helped me to reframe things and look at things and how we talk about stuff. But there was an element of pride too that I had to confront about this, in thinking that I had kind of, we were a little bit older when we got married, and I know what I'm doing, but I really didn't. I didn't really understand how deeply I was tied to them, and how that looked in interacting with you.
From my perspective, I'm I'm bringing up that memory of you on the floor that day. And there was so much going on. To put some added context to that, there was so much that was swirling and shifting and changing. It was not easy because so much change was happening with a change. And I think during that, you said it was like a couple weeks or something like that. And we were finding in our engagement that like the stuff in our lives, I was working through anxiety, obsessive stuff, and I wasn't even really at that time even recognizing how much it was OCD, right? I knew that, I got that, right. But I didn't realize how much of it was affecting my life. So much change, so much uncertainty going on. The stress levels are maximized, and you're there. I think, if I remember right, you had lived at your place, you were making shifts, and you were cleaning up my condo.
Yep. I was trying to make our home.
I had the bachelor look, and we were getting prepared, and you were helping with those things, and I'm walking in, and finding you in this moment, and there was a series of conversations we had where we had the opportunity to go, do you want to do this?
Yeah, you did.
Do you really want to do
I
this?
remember.
There was the initial one where you knew that I was moving on, and I was moving on to something that was going to be different, that I was going to be moving into an emphasis out of heart healing and restoring lives, that kind of, like so much of what we talk about today, the early rumblings of it. And I remember looking at you and giving you an out.
You did. I remember I was sitting on the couch. I remember this day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me.
And I was like, if you want to get out of this, it's okay.
Yeah.
And
I was starry-eyed and in love, and was like, what? We can. Yeah.
I disagree. I don't think you were just wrapped up in love. I think there was.
Well, I hear you.
There was a sobriety, and this is I'm taking a long way to making a point, but just giving some context. In the midst of it, I had an injury.
Oh gosh!
And then I was staying. So you were staying at my place. I was staying with a friend because we didn't.
My dad had a Polaris that he would whip around. He had about 9 acres, horses and a whole thing. And he had a Polaris that he would whip around to, get the horses and all that. And we were having fun one day, just zipping around. And Mark thought he could turn it and flip and do, what do you call that? Spin out on it. And he hit mud and the thing flipped and his leg, oh gosh.
That could have been pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I ended up hurting my knee. So then we were like, we wanted to honor God, and we didn't want to live together till marriage. So you were cleaning, and I was staying somewhere else.
Right.
I'm thinking everything was in an upheaval.
I forgot about your injury with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just remembered it too. So my point being, in the midst of this, is that there's something very special about you. And this is what, outside of all the things that I was struggling and battling, there was something about you that was very appealing and just so powerful about you, was with all you came from, and you'll get into however you're processing that and continuing to process what it's meant for you to leave family and carve your journey. Is there something I saw in you that you're set apart, and you were hungry to move past the ordinary and move out of the cliche world that a lot of people live in when it comes to their faith, and you wanted to heal and you wanted to grow in that. So even though you'd have these moments, like that moment where you're crying, this was not I didn't feel like I needed to convince you or of anything or try to fix you in that moment. It was like I knew in you there was a hunger to grow. And you had every chance to get out, and there were many moments where it was up until right in, we're like, okay, this is tough, this is challenging. But there was something within you that said, I want to grow and I want to heal. And I say that to share with people who, they write to me, they comment, you come from a world of stuff that's just so challenging. Neglect, complex trauma, and pain. Many of us are raised under some form of addictions too. And so codependency is
It's an addiction.
Is always there in the realm. Christians are just a lot of times better at hiding, these things. And so your story and your journey has been one that I've admired because you continue to stay in a place of pointing your compass that, and God has like shown these different layers where you realize another layer of leaving father and mother, right?
Right.
It's not leaving father and mother is not like at the wedding, here, you're leaving, right? It's a continual like leaving. And I want to mention this too, because a lot of my single brothers and sisters check out right now.
Right.
And this isn't about just marriage. When you're post high school, somewhere college age, that's the time to leave father and mother.
Right.
It's the time.
So true.
And many people are stuck. They're stuck emotionally. Many are actually stuck, and they're in stages where they need to take steps to honorably unglue themselves, because the ties to your family also tie in to the cycle of what you're struggling with.
100%.
Right? And there's not a magic formula. Mark, give me the soul tie prayer that I just prayed. Nope.
Yeah, no.
None of it's magical.
Right.
None of it is a prayer that you're going to pray. It's a lifestyle shift and change. Moving out of guilt, moving out of recognizing certain patterns. So I just want to share that what's been amazing walking with you in this is you're this giant receptor of truth.
Thank you.
You're different than me.
Totally.
And I never
joking.
I never prayed for like a pastor's wife. I prayed against the whole average list. I didn't want you to sing. I think you mentioned one of your
And I
episodes.
cannot. We've been over this.
So I was like, check.
Right.
Because I sang and I was like, I don't want to do duets, I was like, I don't want this certain thing that I saw. Now that was pulling on me, right? Like we got to make sure we look right and do things right.
Right.
That vortex was pulling on me, but there's something in me I feel was like wanting the real, the organic, and so.
Right.
So anyway, I think that's the cornerstone thing of any breakthrough you've had or growth you've had or growth I've had is not like how smart we are or anything. It's just continuing, because this is difficult what you're talking about. This is very challenging.
It is.
But it's a heart to like, I want to learn. And I'm open to learning and open to being taught what I need.
Right. Because there are nuanced things when you're on this journey too. And, we're married, we have children, and then you have a day where you interact with your family and then you're gone for 3-4 days. And I'm saying gone for 3-4 days, meaning emotionally. And then you're going, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know. I can't. I feel depressed. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like simple things like that.
Great point. You would bring that out to me too.
I would tell. Yeah, yes.
You would be like you
bro.
haven't been since we left your parents in that visiting, Mark. You've been a bit irritable. Right. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that pattern.
Which then has forced us, because you can go, well, I just interacted with my family. They're ridiculous. And no. Okay, so here's the deeper part of that and looking at that. No, we were ignored while we were around them for 2 days. Or I was with my family and no one asked a thing about us. And it's a subtle thing that's down under in your brain of wanting value, wanting to be loved, wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be looked at. And it's pinging all the pains that you had since you were a child.
Right.
So even though you're married, you're in your full bloom of your life, one day of interaction with your parents, if you're not, I shouldn't say if you're not healed, because I feel like this is just a continuous journey.
Of course.
But can send you spiraling. And now it's affecting your marriage. It's affecting how you're interacting with your children, how you're even interacting with yourself. I know for me, I can go into like just self-pressure, and it goes into more self-pressure in an OCD kind of way of like, to the point where at the end of the day, my back from like just staying busy, making sure pillows are straightened, this looks perfect, this is done, cookies are like, making sure my day feels at peace or complete. Meanwhile, it's just nothing but performance pressure to like escape how I'm feeling. And it's like, no, okay, what's going on?
Right. And then you can kind of see the mirror of that in your generations.
Correct. Because my mom, if she was sitting here right now, she'd go, yep, that's what I did.
Yep. Yeah. And if you can do that compassionately, it's helpful information. If you do it judgingly and shamefully, you're spiraling. You're like, I'm going to be like my parents, and I'm going to,
right. Which I've had those moments of like, I didn't give the kids enough attention today. I didn't do this. I wasn't loving enough to you. And it's like, okay, we've had those moments where I've had to look at all that too. But the deeper part that I would say, in even bringing this up as far as leaving father and mother and looking at the codependency and all that stuff, is really looking at how I grew in grace and love and self-compassion and really giving that to myself, because it's really revealed how I have had, because I'm working on it, no clue how to do it.
Let me ask you a question, because you mentioned you got married later, right? I wonder if in being married, when you get married to someone else, it can be more of a place where you can realize the stuff of your family kicks up because you have somebody else as like a buffer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right? Like marriage brings out.
Right.
Like, wait, no, that's, that's not a healthy way. Like the way you relate brings it out. I almost wonder if the single years of adulthood can be challenging because you don't have that buffer to tell you, hey, something might be a little off here, right? Like I talk about this. One of the benefits of marriage is that it helps my sanity in the sense of like I say something and you're like, no, that ain't right, and I kind of like, yeah, you're right, I'm off, right? Relationship has that way of sharpening us. If you're single, so I want to ask you, do you feel like because of your single years, you built up this reservoir of not leaving father and mother that further glued you into the generational patterns and family stuff, so that it was almost like it increased in the 20s. So by the time you
100%. That's why honestly, I am an advocate. Get married young. Grow together. I mean, now listen, we have a lot of immaturity. Is it went millennial to then what's the next one?
Gen Z.
Oh my, y'all need.
And then I think we're back to A.
It's yes. I feel like I don't know. It's funny because when you look at previous generations, didn't we watch a video on this? People look more mature, and they were, I don't know. Were they? Weren't they? I don't know. Maybe it just seems that way.
When you look at pictures of yourself or teenagers in like the 80s, they look like they're 30-year-olds.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody did a video on
this. It's like they were talking about like a psychological phenomenon that when you look back at your history, people look older. They think it's a brain thing, but I'm not.
I don't know. I think
I'm not convinced. I'm like, I don't know. Like Johnny at 16 looked like he was 30.
Right. He had a full beard in 10th grade.
And 16-year-old Johnny today looks like he's 11.
Right. There's been so much. Well, we could talk about what's in the food. But so I think you're right on. I had this collection of years and years of just constantly retreating back to them rather than a spouse that we were sitting and talking and yes.
Yeah, it's like my counselor. It's like my counselor the first time I met with him, and at the end of it, he's like, "Hey, by the way, you should move out of your parents' home."
And you're like, "What?"
And it just didn't. That showed my lack of awareness of leave father and mother. It's time to take your journey. And I had all these, usually the reasons are I need to save. It's usually money. I need to save money, and I realized I had to learn, like, no, I've got to take that step. And so then there were times and seasons where I had to make very difficult steps to leave father and mother, to kind of like make decisions into new patterns without written consent of Major League Baseball.
No, I just want to say too, the amount of people that I talk to who are entwined with their parents or their in-laws, out of decisions they make, vacations. Well, this one's going to get upset. We can only stay so many days because this one's going to get upset and they don't like my husband. The amount of ties that we have and decisions we make based on this issue is, I know it's destroying some marriages.
In the name of honor your father and mother. And codependency distorts what that scripture even means.
Right.
Because it makes us codependent with our parents' sins.
Boom. It's so nasty.
Sorry, wrong one. Wrong one. That's it.
Yes. All right. Now I will bring in another facet to this too, is because of the patterns in my family. We had a pretty heartbreaking breach when my parents got divorced for the second time. And then my brother at a young age shortly after went and lived with my dad. So interacting with my brother and my father, my sister and I would go either every week or every other week. So we had this like separation in family. So in interacting with my brother and my father, as far as building relationship with a man, there was a massive breach there that to this day still pains me, especially over my brother, because I never feel like we created a healthy bond with each other. And I feel like I'm always in rejection mode with him and trying to like, how can I make it better? And he's married now and I don't want him to feel like, and sometimes I look at it and it feels like a spaghetti mess of how do you heal it? How do you fix it? Because there's all these things that my parents did and made decisions that then affected how we interacted as siblings, that it crushes me, it crushes me. But going back to how I looked at men and relationships with men, I had to look at that when it came to interacting with you. And you and I had a very precious time early on in our marriage of even repenting to each other on, It was so special. But it came on the heels of a lot of heartache that we were wrestling out with each other.
We were fasting and praying about Max because he was showing all the signs of being on the autism spectrum, and it was a weird it was a weird thing, not weird, but it was unexpected, because what it did was it turned the spotlight on you and I working on our hearts, and that's when we had moments where we actually sat down and repented to each other.
Yeah, we did.
Sometimes we don't think of it in that way. We think of apologizing to someone. We think of repenting to God, which is certainly biblical, but we don't think of it in a way of like, I'm coming to you to say, I'm turning into a new way of thinking, and I'm humbling myself to let you know that I'm operating in that. We found that to be really powerful. We didn't have anyone teach us that. It just organically happened. Like, am I right?
Do you remember that day when you came home from? It was very, very special.
So there's layers of that we worked on, and it's like people, I think, get obsessive about like trying to like shift their family dynamics, make the right decisions, do the right things, and it's really not about like getting all the spaghetti untangled. You'll exhaust yourself. It's more about like layer by layer, like dealing with what's in front of you, what's being made evident. And God has, what we've allowed is layer by layer, because like you've mentioned, you're still in this process, and we're always in that process of undoing what we've come from and renewing what we're headed into and who we really are in Christ. Right. And I feel like who we are in Christ no one preaches on this. Who we are in Christ gets interfered by our genetic family. That's what's happening, right? Because many of I've experienced this. You step into the new and you feel like your family will go, oh, that's amazing. We support you. Watch what happens when you break through some of the areas that are like really ingrained in your family. And there's like this, like this resistance that rises up. You get the dead stare, you get the silence, you get like criticism. That I don't know that I was prepared for, because you think like, I'm following God. We all say we respect the ways of God here. What is going on?
Right.
And that's where you have a decision. Am I just serving the ways of my family, or am I going to step into new territory. Not in like being a jerk or. I always feel like I have to qualify that when I say that. You know, just say it, Mark. You're stepping out. You're stepping out into new things, and you sometimes you have to make those bold steps to say, I'm not serving this way of thinking anymore in our lives. Is there an emergency?
Abby, we're still filming.
Yes. Yes, we're still filming.
Mm-hmm. Well.
So, okay.
Can I say something that just came to my mind too?
Yes.
Because I don't want to just totally like destroy my family. Okay. This was something that was interesting, right? Because even within dysfunctional families, they can have moments where you connect to them. And I want to bring this out because it actually revealed my dysfunctional pattern. So you and I are newly married. I don't even think a couple months. And we get into a huge brawler arguing with each other. And I was like, I'm out, which was a problem I had to deal with of I could be an ice queen and I could literally have a fight with you, say the most horrible things and go to sleep like a baby. And you are like, what is wrong with you? You are the complete opposite. You are like no, we are going to like not let the sun go down on our wrath. We are going to deal with this.
Yeah, it's 2 in the morning and we're going to talk about this right now.
And he is devastated and just like, what is wrong with you? Okay. Yeah. So we have one of these brawlers and I'm like, that's it. I'm leaving. And I get in the car because that's what I like to do because it was easier. Just get in the car and drive. So I call my mom and because that's my pattern. She's going to call. She's going to make me feel better. I'm going to tell her and she'll be on my side. Right. And I call her, and I'll never forget this. I pulled into the parking lot down the street from us in Buckland, the Buckland Mall area. And I pulled into and I'm sobbing, and I'm just like, we were just going through a lot. And she said to me, go home. She said, go home. And I was like irritated. No, I needed you to buddy up with me, be on my side, like, dog him out, you know, and she didn't. And I was really irritated. She told me, go home. That is your husband. Go home and work it out with him. And it had to confront how my dysfunctional patterns were, even in going to them. And in that moment, I was like, okay, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, we both had that I'm out kind of thing that we would withdraw and then I had my own car moments.
Right.
Where I would in like
right.
my moment was, God, you brought this woman into my life. I was throwing all the shade at him, you know,
because too you had your history of stuff, but I brought in my fighter history of my things, and I wasn't easy, babe. I'm sorry, I wasn't easy.
Well, you know what's interesting? You said about that. You said about the ice queen, and I'm like, I think the ice queen's melted out. Like,
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm like that's interesting because we haven't used that term.
I know we haven't, but in the beginning, I was like, that's just the truth. Okay, I've come a long way.
The ice queen's been melted out. She tries to make appearances
every so often, where I'm like, okay, I'm too tired for this. I'm over it. What
was I going to say? So I remember for me, as I'm like ranting at God, and this is why I tell people, like, it's not the end of the world if you vent out at God. Just hang in there though. Don't just yell at him and walk away. I'm in the car and what comes back to me is get back in there and humble yourself. And that again, another level of pride being broken, because pride protects our generations. It protects the sins of our generations, you know. And it's like I just need to humble myself, you know, and learn how to because I have zero tools in knowing how to love you. And so I got to learn, and humility is the best way to break through in any area of your life, is start with humility. But yeah, like even those moments where she's telling you, you know, get back in there. I'm curious as you move in this, do you want to move into some of the things in how you recognize healing today and how this moves today, or I don't want to try to like.
No. Thank you, babe. You're helping me out. Yeah, because you know it's been a long journey. We are 16 years.
Tomorrow.
We're
celebrating tomorrow.
8/11. Yeah, we are. I can't believe it. It's crazy. And it's been, sometimes have been hard in having to look at the spaghetti mess, as we call it, inside of me. But it's been a beautiful journey too, of growing and learning. And a big part of it for myself is, like I said in the beginning, is not being afraid of God, knowing that he's looking at it going, it's all right, honey. Just sit and talk to me. Not being afraid and seeing him through the lens of what I grew up with. I first off had to really, really deal with that, of how I saw God. Because then ultimately it was like, okay, how was I receiving love from him? Which then processing that love inside of myself, which would, our book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself, has been a huge journey for you and I together of what that looks like, and just having respect for myself and love for myself, and not having that self-doubt that I have to go outside and look to my family to get, or, getting approval from others, that what that looks like, and then bringing that even in how I'm loving you, that I'm sure of who I am. I have love inside of me that I can then flow out to you. So
I think what's been helpful, I'm going to kind of throw a couple thoughts into this. I think what's been helpful for us in recent years is working through materials that even have to do with complex trauma, because it's the there's addiction components we both come from. And so there's a lot of terminology that even in addict recovery and children of alcoholics and things like that are very, very, very helpful.
Very helpful.
And also the aspect of complex trauma, very, very helpful, because it brings out the areas of neglect and emotional neglect, what it leaves in your life. Because complex trauma is that there's a lot of drama going on, but then there's also just a massive world of emotional neglect. And neglect is a form of abuse in what it does. So someone who's been physically abused, emotionally abused, you take someone who's been neglected, they can have very, very similar manifestations. But you'd go to this person, they weren't abused. It's a form of not being given what was needed, especially in crucial moments of your life and your journey. And so I find that even over the recent years, there's been new levels of healing. I feel like even since we've moved down here, you and I have dug, I think, deeper than ever before.
Correct.
In recognizing our families.
Right.
I feel like at this stage in my life, I've recognized aspects of my family like never before. And you too.
Right.
Where you're having like eye-awakening of like how you relate to your mom, how you relate to your dad, how that affects you, how that impacts your sense of peace, well-being, and all that stuff. That is very, very, very helpful in our journey. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, I think that, no, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because the piece about understanding, how I saw God through the lens of my earthly parents and all of those things was a building block. Right. But I kept bumping into this thing that I had in myself for years too, that like I was the problem. Now I tackled some of that in understanding God's love and like all those things, but there was still this like thing hanging over me. When we dove the next step into understanding trauma, understanding being raised by narcissistic behavior patterns, like understanding those things, it then made me go to a whole next level of understanding my patterns and where I struggled. Like, so good. But it's been a beautiful journey of like, okay, working through God's love as him as father, like going through all those things. But it I don't want to say it wasn't enough. I don't want to say that. That's not what I mean. But it was a beautiful part of the journey that then in now coming to this next stage that you and I have really dug so deep into those things. It's helped me to even land on it.
Yeah, because it's really more about the thing that I've been talking a lot in our interactions. It's really about, it's restoring you to be kinder to yourself.
I was going to say self-acceptance. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's it's something that I have to like help people to understand. Yes, God, we want to restore relationship with God, but what trauma, pain, emptiness, heartache, complex trauma, you name it, whatever it is, right? When we start to recognize those things, what it does is it separates you from yourself in the sense of like and there's many ways we do this. We beat ourselves up. We criticize, judge ourselves. We're harsh against ourselves. You're perfectionistic. And what it does is if you were to do that to another person, it's a way of like rejecting them.
Right.
You're not loved, right? Get it together. Get it together, right? So we do that with God. And we start breaking through, okay, God's not doing that, but then we're still struggling because we're still an enemy to ourselves.
100%.
And God is healing you and I in how we actually actively interact with ourselves.
Yep.
On a daily basis, because you interact with yourself 24/7. You react, you respond, you judge, you critique, you assess, right? And the majority of it is abusive because it's reflecting what was done in your family history. It just reinforces it, and then there's a lot of self-blaming. There's something wrong with me. It's my fault. All that stuff. That's a sign. Yep. That's a sign of abuse.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a sign of all this stuff.
So good.
So talk about the struggle today, because we're talking about what we struggle with. Right?
Where's my notes?
Yeah, get into kibbles and bits, because last week I was talking about my current, how it's happening right now.
Okay. I think the biggest thing is not having the reactions that I used to have. Okay, so I feel like I have currently today. Some days I'm better with it, some days I'm not. What my reactions are when I'm triggered by my parents or my family.
Because you've made, and I'll say this as an outside observer, you've made some very, very powerful steps in recent years. Is it okay if I say that and bring that out? You've made some powerful steps where I've watched you and I was like, girl.
Right. Here, this is an interesting one that maybe a lot of married couples can relate to. And Mark's like, thank you, because he benefits from it. But, you know, when you're married, you're like, we have to be a united front. We go and do events together, you know. And I have said to him now, over the past however many years, you don't want to go, don't go.
Oh, yeah. To family events, right.
You don't want to go, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
Now, I will say to you, hey, I want you to be there with me. Like, you know, Christmas is a thing.
Right. You mean I have to go Christmas? You mean I have to show up? Well, because it's not.
I cannot. It's so funny.
It's not that. It's not that going to family events, you know, that like going to it or not going to it. It's more like when you're untangling these things, like you had a thing about it that as you were getting freer, there wasn't any kind of.
I didn't care what they thought about it.
Right. Because there was something.
I had to lose that.
Right. Once you lose that, then it's like, this thing isn't really a big deal. Where I'd be like, you know what? I'd really love to do that wood project today. Could I finish? Why don't you guys go have a good time? And it was like, yeah, that sounds great.
Yep.
And it was like, oh, this is beautiful. And
I honored more you and I having peace and sanity and what the flow was between us and recognizing maybe even what you needed in the moment, rather than me having to make sure a picture looked a certain way and us meeting the need of what my family thought were all coming. And no.
Right.
Because when you're looking at all that stuff, there's a lot of stuff entwined in it.
Yeah, because a lot of people, whether they're single or married, their assessment of decisions is, what will my family think?
Right.
So that becomes a driving factor. You move that out, and it's like, oh, I'm free to live and move and have my being.
Right.
It's like, you know.
And another thing for me too that I would say I'm currently working on is that once you start to recognize patterns and understand, for me personally, because I have a sassy personality, I will buck back at my parents and attack them. And on my end, I have to be accountable for that too, because like they're who they are. And if I'm going to be in relationship with them, I don't need to beat them up all the time either. So I have been in an excruciating process of even sometimes how I interact with them and how I let them know that if I'm hurting or even if I feel like it's worth it, it's
the script of healing is not
it's not perfect.
It's not a fixed thing. A lot of people, like on social media, they're like, you need to get them out of your life and just shut them down.
And some people have to go no contact, and I understand that. And
that becomes like the prevailing thing, though. That it's either like you're just enmeshed or you shut them out forever, and it's not black and white. There are times you have to. There are seasons of our life we had to really put our foot down in boundaries. But then there's times where you're recognizing part of the journey of healing is accepting this is where my family's at, and that takes a while to really embrace. Like even when we stepped out in ministry, we thought like there's times where there was a lot where we're struggling and like, why does anybody ask us about the ministry or what we're doing? Wouldn't they be excited with it, right? And it took a while to go, accept that's where it's at, right?
I haven't accepted that.
Okay.
That's
awesome. That's awesome.
I'm sorry.
That's great. Okay.
You know how I know I haven't? Let me break this down. Because it's a repetitive thing that comes off of me. It's a pain. I'm sorry.
So
I bring it up a lot. I do.
Yeah, because like it was odd. Like we'd have like a Sunday service. We would leave it. Everyone knew we were just at church, and there wouldn't even.
We go to my family. I'm going to say it. Well, we had family sometimes with yours, but most of the time it was mine.
And there would literally like the normal thing would be like, "Hey, how are you doing? How was church today?" And it would be like it never happened. Because
let me break something down too. Because if people are thinking, well, maybe you guys were too much, we aren't. Like we are the people on the plane. I'm not going to try to win you to Jesus. Right. I just want to get my flight over.
Right.
I'm not an evangelist. I'm not. And I don't do that to my family.
Right.
So it's not like they were afraid of entering into a spiritual conversation. They just didn't.
We're not like waffing with the Lord was so good today. It was amazing. Praise God. It was just
we are not. Okay. You should probably get that sense from us by now. But if you've been following us.
That was good. I'm not. Fair enough. So I don't know what my point was, but it was like
funny.
It's I don't
know. How do we land this?
It's the acceptance. You're well illustrating. That's really the part of the journey of like, this is where they're at and it's not really going to change. Oh, that's a lack of faith, Mark. It's not, because you actually have to move on with your journey, and it's actually holding your faith captive because you're staring backwards while wondering why you're not moving forward.
Right.
And so it is a step of faith to go, this is where it's at. I've got to go on my journey. And what it does is it releases your family to God, because someone else is going to probably be a better voice, because people don't listen to their family, including Jesus Christ himself.
Right.
Who's this carpenter's son? Right. So if he had that problem, you're going to have that.
Because I think too, even just as you were talking, we get a lot of emails from people who are like, my father abused me, but he's elderly now and I have to take care of him and he's still abusive. But, I feel like the Lord is telling me to take care of. Yep. Okay. Even if you feel like, okay, I'm not in a place of going no contact, I still want to interact with my family. You can heal yourself enough to be able to set boundaries. Because I had to do this one day with my own father. I had to say to him, okay, listen up. And it was a moment, too, that I was very proud of myself, because I didn't scream at him. I didn't have to, talk to him like he was a child. And that was my growth of, I'm going to tell you right now, if you act like this, I'm going to take my husband and my children and we're leaving. Just so we're clear. Are we clear? Okay. Now, he had a choice. He was like, okay, I understand. And, okay. Can I get to a place. Go ahead.
Can I just insert a thought? Because I like to...
Okay.
Bring out the teaching moment. You very well illustrated what a boundary looks like, because what a boundary does is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes what it brings is an opportunity for reasonability. Mm-hmm. You gave an option for reasonability. It wasn't like, I need you to agree with my way of living. I need you to do all these things. Can you agree to this? that, and you were saying, if it's going to be this way, this is what's going to happen. Can you at least be reasonable at this level? Mm-hmm. That helps you give your answer, because then if it's like, no, I don't, and you get resistance, it's like, that's where you're getting your answer. What a lot of people do is then keep going. Well, what about, and they keep going back. And then
they feel bad and they keep trying to over-explain.
Right.
The real growth in the journey is that you are confident enough in yourself to say, this is what I'm willing to, or not willing to take anymore.
Yeah. It's out of, as you grow in self-acceptance and grow in love for yourself, growing in love for yourself helps you in those moments to make decisions that are honoring to who God has made you to be. Right. And this is why Christians struggle with the concept of loving yourself. They think it's arrogance, because we've been so abused, so neglected, so ill-equipped, so beaten down in our emotions. We think that love means you walk around like this everywhere, and that's not even anywhere near. It's you operate out of a respect for who God has made you to be. Right. Like, I'm a son of God. I'm His creation, and I'm going to honor the vessel that I am. And you can have great conversations with family members and people, and you can find the place of reasonability. Humility and reasonability are the places, right? I'm going to stay humble. I don't know it all. I don't have it all together. That's one aspect. Second aspect is, can we reason? I believe in God. You don't. Can we be reasonable? Right? Well, you're not going to sit there and, I don't know, you're going to say snide things about what I do or demean.
Right. Which a lot of people have to deal with that.
Can we agree on that and how we're conducting ourselves? Or even like what they demand of you, what they pull or expect. Like, listen, I'm not doing that. Can you handle that? Can we be okay with that? And then that gives you your answer of what you're dealing with. Because if they say, yes, okay, we have reasonability here. Like, we'll come over and we're not going to talk, we're not going to get into that politics stuff, because we don't agree. We're not going to get into, you don't agree with what I'm doing in my faith walk or whatever. Can we handle that? If we can handle that, then there's a reasonable place we can meet together. And it doesn't mean we're going to hang out all the time or do everything together, but here's where we can. And then that allows you room to continue on your healing journey without constantly being under the bombardment of family dynamics and demonics and the swirl of stuff.
Right, because most of us are still in the place of, you're trying to convince your parents. So if you're trying to set a boundary, like, hey, so, that kind of hurt, you're still under you're trying to get their approval and love, and you're afraid. Because I think as you're saying those things of even trying to find reasonability, I think most people are afraid of the answer. Because if most people say, well, if I try to even put that out, what I'm going to get back is not the answer I want. And that's hurtful and it's hard. And that's okay to be honest with yourself, but it's the process in moving towards being able to have enough love for yourself to say, okay, I'm picking up the kids and we're out.
Yeah, that is.
I'm sorry for that answer, but we're leaving.
That is challenging. I think that's challenging.
Right?
That's why it takes so long for people sometimes to make more firm decisions.
Yes.
It takes them many, many rounds of realizing your parents don't want to change. They're not interested in changing, or your sister is not reasonable, or your brother is not interested in being healthier. They're not interested. They want to. And I think that's one of the reasons. Like, when there's a thing that I feel the enemy uses a lot, is this family thing to pull us back under the guise of, well, it's family, right?
Yeah.
Jesus had this too. They brought in his mother, and he's like, it's not my mother, right? It's so harsh, you think, right? But you have to, context is everything. What's he doing? Their desire to pull family was a disruption to actually what God was doing in that moment.
Right.
And I think that picture shows us like family guilt and I feel bad, all that stuff. If you want to live like Jesus, you'll see he didn't live by the I feel bad.
Right.
To the point that he was late to funerals. He was like,
gosh,
people are like, what would Jesus do? Like, yeah, we never got to that part in those books where they were like, what would Jesus do? It was all about like all these behaviors. We never talked about like not serving family guilt if we want to live like Jesus. Right. Anyways.
I think that's a great place to land, honestly.
Thanks for sharing and being so open. I'm still laughing at you saying I'm not. I was just like,
well, it's like you guys have heard us talk before. You never know when the family's going to tune in, and it's a very delicate balance of, what do you share? How much do you share? And
right. I never know.
You never know. So we do our best to be honoring, but yet be truthful and honest.
Yeah. Sometimes I walk away and go, I don't know.
I know.
And you just have to give yourself. We have to give ourselves permission to go. We're learning as we're growing.
Yeah.
And
then Abby walks in while we're halfway through. I don't know.
All right, let's get out of here. Let's go.
Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Thank you so much. If this has been a blessing to your life, you can support these broadcasts. MarkDasis.com. Click on the donate button, and there's many resources, wonderful materials. Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We'll come back. Let us know if you want a part 4, and if not, we'll move on to some other subjects. I don't know, but we'll. Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We'll get into some more, but in the meantime, we're out.